If you're like most men, you'll hate to admit this. Your comfort zone is making you weak. You reach for your phone when things get hard, you scroll when emotions come up, and that avoidance is killing your ability to handle what life and your marriage throws at you. Today, I sit down with Hamid Ebadi, a facilitator of silent meditation retreats. He spent years guiding people through the kind of stillness most of us are terrified of. You'll learn why sitting with discomfort without distraction is one of the most powerful things you can do. And stay until the end to find out why people want to leave at the start of his retreats, but always end up being grateful that they stayed. You'll walk away knowing the difference between avoiding your life as a husband and actually living it. Let's go. And welcome to the podcast, Hamid. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Alessandro.
Not a problem at all. I'd love to get started with essentially your background. You have such an interesting intersection, and I'd love for you to describe what you do in your own words.
What I do professionally is that I'm a counselor. So that's the field I've studied, and that's my occupation, which keeps me busy most of the days. And then I also offer silent meditation retreats. I invite people to come and sit with me, and most of the people who come are beginners to that, so they haven't done silent retreats before. So it's a discovery for, I would say, most people. Some people have done them before, but for most it's an initiation, it's something they haven't tried before. And because there are no distractions, you can't go on your phone, you don't get messages, you're a bit left with the space that's a bit unknown to you, which is the space of what is this that I don't know, yet it is there and is the backdrop of everything. But all the things that I know that keep me busy, that keep me occupied and engaged, prevents me from tapping into. But it's not like the silent retreat creates that. It's not created, it's always there. It's just that it's not at hand, because what is at hand is our busyness, our distractions, our activities. So it's just like, dwelling in and withdrawing from too much engagement from the outside and through the silence and the stillness. And then the other thing is that I do for my own self-expression, which is writing poetry, which I've been doing for a few decades now, and it has not yet been published, but maybe one day it will.
It's very beautiful. I'd love to dig into the silent retreats. And why do you think today silent retreats are important?
Well, I think silent retreats have always been important. And if you look back at all the spiritual traditions in the West or in the East, all of them, I would say, have a strong component of contemplative practices where the practitioners would spend an important amount of time in seclusion, in solitude, and in silence to feel closer to, in some traditions, God, in some traditions in the Buddhist tradition, it is what you call their Buddha nature, their own nature of awakening. So the contemplative periods of practice that take the forms of retreat, as we know them more today, have been present for centuries. Now, you may ask, why is that more relevant today? It's not something that our day and age has come across and invented. This has got a long history. But I think, yes, it becomes more relevant in our day and age because I don't think, due to technological development and the ways technology has become such a dominant part of everyone's life, the ability to draw within and to tune in to something more quintessential about ourselves feels at the same time more vital and important, and at the same time more difficult to attain because of the level of interaction, distraction that we have with the exterior through messaging, social media interactions, being online. So you're constantly solicited from the outside, and that I think makes the appeal to go within more significant and important than ever. Yeah.
I love that. So really, would you sum up that the silent retreat essentially is a tool for us to go within?
Well, it's interesting you use the word tool, because that, in a way, I would say it is a tool, and then it's much more than a tool, because if you have a tool, it's about applying it in some way to do something with that tool. But here you are just actually moving towards something that's unknown. So I don't know what the unknown would be a tool for. It's a more, I would say, a way of self-discovery and discovering through oneself, one's relationship with the world, one's relationship with others, and feeling it from a different place. So when we use the word tools, and I think in self-development, personal development, and in so many areas, the word tools, and having a toolbox, and being able to use the right tools is pertinent and meaningful. Here, I think we're speaking about something that has a depth that just it being something that we can use as a tool does not necessarily render justice to what this thing is about.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I mean, there is an unknown to it.
Right.
There is a sort of mystical to it. Is it formed? I mean, you spoke about Buddhism, but are we formed solely in Buddhism, or is there any other dogma, religion, or anything like that you practice through it? Like, how does religion inform what you do?
Well, it depends on your understanding and definition of what religion is. If we're talking about religion, we are thinking in terms of institutionalized religion, of whatever sort that may be. I would not think that that is about it. But religion, stricto sensu, comes from a Latin word, which is the verb religere. In Latin means to tie something to something else, or to connect something to something else. So religion, in the sense of connecting us to something that we are never really completely disconnected with, which is life, or the nature of reality, is a religious act. So religion, in that sense, finding our place and our belonging to something much vaster than us, to which we belong as well, I would say would be one way of looking at religion, which I would find more resonant. So here you have no dogmas, you have no belief systems as such, and it's not about adhering to a set of articles of faith, but it's about tapping into that nature of reality that holds everything and of which we are also a part. But in what we are going through, and maybe there is an element of modern crisis that I don't know to when we can, take that back to, there is a sense of urgency to finding that connection, because the loss of that connection is the loss of soul and the loss of heart. And with that comes alienation and sense of disconnect from self and others, or ways of connecting with self and others that are not wholesome, that are not conducive to well-being, and are not they're not conducive to establishing sustainable, meaningful relationships with others. So I would say, yes, in that sense, that would be one way of looking at it.
I've had to come to terms with this myself in terms of religion and understanding. And I love your ability to connect religion to essentially being life, this flow of life. And I'd love to hear your take on a metaphor that I don't know whether it came to me, I don't know whether I'd read it, but I've been using it for quite a long time, and that there is some universal truth underlying everything, and I believe that that's kind of akin to hot water, like boiling water. And whenever somebody pulls that truth in, it is akin to them being a tea bag, and they're creating some kind of flavor of hot water. And when they share it, that flavor is mixed with the culture of their time, the where they are and who they're speaking to, and the life experiences they've had. And so we do get, throughout all the traditionalized religions that we have, there is hot water, there is truth through it, but it is flavored by the the culture of the time. Would you say that, how would you, I would just love to hear your take on that metaphor, which has always been in my head.
I think one metaphor, to speak about metaphor, you talked about the hot water and the tea bag, is that there is this ocean that could be symbolize the nature of reality, the nature of ultimate truth, or whatever you want to call it, the absolute. And then there are thousands of little streams or rivers or watercourses that have different sources. Some of them come from mountain peaks. They have different journeys through plateaus and valleys. But inevitably, they all somehow end up in that ocean, in that vastness. And they kind of dissolve in that greater truth. So although the sources or the journeys may differ, in the end, we all end up in that ocean somehow. So that's how I see it. And then I also like another metaphor, again, the metaphor of water, is that, we all know that the sea has a flavor, is saline, as salty. So even if no matter how many watercourses that come from the mountains, let's say, they are water that's not salty, but they're tasteless. But after some time, after a kilometer or two of the strongest river that flows into the ocean, it will impregnate the taste of that ocean. So that's another way of looking at it, that whatever we come with, it finally dissolves into that greater body of reality, of which we are actually not separated. But the delusion that we have is that we think we are somehow separated from that ocean and we need to find our way into that ocean. But our way to the ocean has always been traced for us. It's just that we have lost sight of it and a sense of it.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And so would you say that all your work guides people to remember that? Would you say? If you're listening to the show, you're already asking the right question. How do I show up better? Maybe things feel harder than they should at home. Maybe you know something needs to shift, but you're just not sure where to start. Here's what I know. You're not lazy. You're not broken. You just never got the manual. Nobody teaches men how to be husbands. Nobody shows you how to navigate the hard conversations, regulate your emotions, or turn your marriage into an actual team. That's why I created Better Husband in 2-Minute Emails. It's one email every Saturday morning with one tool you can use that week. There's no therapy speak, no blame, just the skills that actually move the needle. 2 minutes, one Saturday morning, that's your entry point. Because 3 months of focused work beats 20 years repeating the same damn pattern. Links in the show notes. First email lands this Saturday.
I would say that a big part of my work is to be a facilitator for people to ask themselves questions. I am not the one who brings any answers to them. I find that actually quite tedious. And today, it's enough to be someone who has some knowledge of something, and then if you find a platform and you think you can bring answers to other people, because people are so much in need of some profound answers, they will look to you and they may find that very relevant, and that establish a relationship that may be of interest. And I'm not discounting it, but it's not one that interests me. What I'm interested in is sparing a person to ask questions themselves and then find their journey through those questions and see where it takes them. And that is one of the things that I find very interesting, is that people who come and spend time in these retreats with me and with others, they often come with this statement at the end of saying that this experience has actually in some way has confused me more than when I came here in the beginning, which I find paradoxical, but actually very interesting, because confusion in the sense of I thought I knew what my life was about and now it's not so clear, maybe that is the first step into a deeper kind of inquiry, because that deeper inquiry cannot begin until the desire in you or the impulse in you to question your beliefs, your understanding, what you are holding onto, your opinions, and to realize maybe it's not about that. Maybe I need to reevaluate all the things I'm holding on to in terms of value systems, beliefs, and ideas. And that's opening the gate to what we started the conversation with, to the unknown. So I'm just like a facilitator of that, helping people to ask themselves questions. But sometimes they come to me and say, what's the answer to this question? And in all honesty, I'll tell them, I don't know. It's not my role to answer your questions, but I'm happy to facilitate you to ask questions.
That's beautiful. So when people ask questions, do you think that that's the only way to really find and feel within you, to ask your own questions? I know you said along the lines of other people can tell you what to do, and you said it's tedious for you, but it can work. But in your experience, do you think that asking themselves a question, that's the actual, maybe the truest way to get to something that's within yourself?
But you see, that's also that opens an entirely different conversation. And that is that some people, again, I'm not challenging the significance or the importance or the value of that. They put themselves in positions of being teachers or guides. I don't see myself as a guide. I don't see myself as a teacher. That's why I used, in a very conscious way, the term facilitator. I facilitate a space or spaces for others. But a teacher basically is someone who guides people. And the idea is that I will be presenting myself to a relationship with someone who has knowledge, wisdom, understanding. And as a result of my time spent with them, I will find something that they are pointing out to as some form of realizations, some form of wisdom that they have acquired, and they can share it with me. I'm not, as I said, questioning that, but that for me is not what interests me for quite a few reasons. And one of them is that my own process of questioning has not ceased. I still question much about my own life and my own understanding. And I don't really understand or know how could that be otherwise. Because if we look at the dimension of what, for lack of a better word, or other word we could call the absolute nature of what is, then we are just like a speck of dust in the infinity of space. So how could that speck of dust have any sort of pretension of understanding the depth of something that is far beyond one possibly imagine in terms of scope, of depth and breadth and width and dimensions? So we're just like a tiny grain of sand at the bottom of the ocean. And I think part of the spiritual journey is always coming back to that sense of finding our place in that drop of water that is related to the ocean, but that drop of water dies outside of the ocean. But sometimes, and that's our ego mind, can get so inflated with its own understanding or its sense of what it knows, in which case that drop of water may think that itself is the ocean. So that's the relationship that I would establish between humility and the constant necessity of knowing. And that in Zen is something very important and significant, which is in Zen is what is called the beginner's mind. So no matter how much you know, no matter how much you've learned, no matter how many years you have practiced, you're always a beginner. You're always taking a first step. Now that may sound counterintuitive when it comes to us thinking, well, I've done a lot of journeying, so now I have a lot of experience. But what that actually means, the engagement with the path as a beginner, is that you realize that no matter what you have accomplished or you realized, you're still facing something which is infinite, which is something that's absolutely beyond human consciousness and human understanding. So in that sense, you're always taking a first step. You're always exposing ourselves to something that's immense. So it's that stepping into the immensity that I would say is about being always a beginner and having a sense of humility and modesty, rather than thinking, I already know this and that and so much. Because at the end of the day, we don't know what we know. And if you go back to Greek philosophy, that is the definition of wisdom by someone like Socrates. There were these oracles, and one of the oracles in Athens in Greece pointed out to Socrates being the wisest man in the city. And so everyone thought that he is the wisest man. And Socrates took that and presented it in the following. And says, the only difference between me is that others think that they know, whilst I know that I do not know. So I think there's a parallel between what Socrates was saying about his so-called wisdom, is that he doesn't know what I just shared with you a moment ago.
It's beautiful. I mean, it's actually the theme of this whole podcast. For me, it's an underwritten theme. The main, I have a tattooed on my arm, I don't know, since we've said is Socrates there, and I've got graffitied on him is shut the fuck up and listen. So it's, and that's what the whole podcast's name is. For me, it's really about me asking questions. And I do think there's beauty to that. There's so many threads we could jump on. Like I was about to ask you that if there was a grain of sand in the bottom of the ocean or a grain of water in the bottom of the ocean, and that's what we are, and what is the purpose of us actually then asking questions? Why not just be that drop of water? If we are this form, then why not be it in all of our glory, if you know what I mean? Why even try and ask about the whole if we are in this form? And I think that's one thread I could go on. Does that feel alive for you?
Yes, that's a very interesting way of looking at it. But then, like in a tradition such as Buddhism, you would say that what prevents us from realizing what you just mentioned, the oneness or our deeper connection with everything, is the place that the ego mind or a separate sense of self due to ignorance occupies within us. So our involvement with our own self-centeredness and egocentricity, which in Buddhism is called ignorance, prevents us from realizing that yes, we are sitting at the bottom of this ocean and there's nothing to realize, and it's already all there, but we do not know it. So the questioning, the journeying, the practices, they are about actualizing that truth that we have lost sense of. So in that sense, I would see that kind of a relationship between something that we do not necessarily, through our realization, change the nature of it, but what we dispel is our ignorance, which is, I am here and that thing is over there. That thing is not over there, I am not here, because there's no, based on that bigger picture, there is no here and there. They're just relative points that in the absolute dimension of things have no bearing.
Is this the kind of thing within a silent retreat? So I might have like a man listening from, let's say he's from Texas and he's listening right now and he's just going like, I don't know about these silent retreats because I don't really want to think this hard. What would you say to that man? Is this what a silent retreat is about? Does it get this philosophical?
I don't know. I wouldn't have anything to add to that person's comment. It's a valid comment. I would say that it's like, I don't know, a process of self-inquiry. Some people start a process of self-inquiry, but they want to come to something very tangible very quickly, and then they're very practical minded and they want to apply that immediately to their lives and see the benefit of it. That's perfectly fine. And there are some people who are questioners, who are dreamers, who are travelers, who are people who like endless journeys, and they don't necessarily even know what's the purpose of the journey, but they just like journeying, they just like discovering, and on that score, I would then call to our conversation a haiku by one of the greatest poets of Japan. His name is Basho. He's the master, undisputed master of the form of poetry. That's 17 syllables. That's called haiku. And so the haikus are extremely succinct. They encapsulate truths that you probably require a book to write. And you have just 17 syllables and you try to say it. So he was someone who was a lot on the road in those days, the old days in Japan 300 years ago. It was very, very difficult to travel, most of the time on foot, to go from one place to another. And he traveled a lot. And one of his haikus is about traveling and the purpose of traveling. Because for us, journeying and the spiritual journey is like, okay, I'm starting point A, and at the end of the day, I want to get to point B, and point B looks like that, or as my idea of what point B or the goal would be. And he says, every day is a journey, and the journey itself is home. Every day is a journey, and the journey itself is home. So I think that's a beautiful way of framing that. So it's not like, where is the journey taking me? I have an idea of where I would want the journey to take me. He says it's more about the appreciation of being on the journey rather than being concerned, where is this taking me to? So that's how I would answer that question.
That's a beautiful, I love that. I'm going to write that down. Might even write that down on my skin one day, who knows? Every day is a journey, and the journey itself is home. Can somebody not be on the journey by living, or do they essentially, are they on the journey just by being here?
Yes, you're all on the journey, whether we know it or not, or how we tap into it. I think being born is a journey, and dying is a journey, and what's in between is a journey. It's our life journey, and whether we think of what we think of it, if we conceptualize it, if we think about it, if we reflect on it, we are nonetheless on that path. Yes, that's for sure.
Because I think that's probably where ego comes in, and when somebody can tell you whether you're on a journey or not, whether you're letting go of your journey or anything like that, I think that's the real distinction here, is that everyone's on a journey, even the people who are perceived as not on a journey. That is their journey. It's just by living. What does a retreat look like for somebody who actually has never, even known what a silent retreat is? Like, how long is it? Like, on the real practical sense, if you don't mind sharing.
Sure, thank you for bringing me back to practical things.
It's all part of the journey.
Well, we have shorter versions and longer versions. The shorter ones are 4 days, and the longer ones are 8 days, so it's double the amount. And it involves a lot of sitting, it involves also yin yoga practice, it involves taking walks in the nature, and it involves also, in the evenings, I give a talk to give people who are sitting there some kind of a context as to what this is about, by asking questions more than answering anything, but just opening space and tapping into some of the teachings that I have been studying for some time now. So I would say at the practical level, what happens is that people are invited to sit with what may at times feel physically and emotionally uncomfortable, because you don't have the possibility of distracting yourself. And in our everyday lives, if we go through a difficult thought, a difficult emotion, a difficult sensation, we always have the ability to reach out to something that will ease our way out of that, the discomfort of that moment. Now, that is the paradox. And I would say that's one of the paradoxes that one can encounter and appreciate in a silent retreat, is that what we call our comfort zones have ended up making us feel extremely uncomfortable. Uncomfortable in the sense that we have very low thresholds of tolerance for what life sometimes throws at us, which is something that's unknown, something that's a situation for which immediately we do not have an answer. So instead of sometimes sitting with things and letting that settle in us, we resort to action, or sometimes to removing ourselves from what's uncomfortable. So I would say maybe you have had a lot of repressed, unexpressed feelings and emotions that have kind of been there, but you haven't really tapped into them. As you do not engage with others, as you do not use language to bring up something, express something that maybe feels difficult just to get it out, and as you are sitting still and not ceding to the temptation to remove yourself from a physically difficult moment, then what you end up doing is to sit with what is emotionally and physically uncomfortable and noticing that there is this urge in you to come out of that. But as there's a group that's very supportive and everyone you realize they're probably going through the same kind of experience as you, there's this bigger container that supports that discomfort. And that is one of the things I found very interesting, is that throughout that period of practice, if you were to go with your microphone and we'd ask, what is this moment for you? I think most people will honestly tell you, this is not fun. I'm not enjoying this. This is not where I want to be. I even wonder, what the hell am I doing here? So that's what comes up. But at the end, when this is over and people have a sharing, closing circle and they express what they feel, the vast majority of times, people express a deep appreciation for having been given the opportunity of sitting with what is emotionally challenging and difficult. That has a lot of value, because that gives us a sense that I have it in me to be this container for things that I usually think I do not have the ability to contain, and then I distract myself not to feel them, but that is kind of expands our inner container for being with our emotions and feelings. I think that has a lot of value. I don't know if that directly answers your question.
It doesn't directly. You have a wonderful way of taking the practical into the non-practical, but I think it does answer the question, because it is quite practical, and it's something of, I think, if I am to summarize here, I think it's for the people who feel a call to sit with discomfort because they find themselves avoiding discomfort.
Exactly.
Find themselves avoiding discomfort. I remember there was a moment I was doing a yoga retreat in Sri Lanka in March, and there was a moment I was sitting, and whenever I sit upright to meditate, like, there's a certain point where my lower back starts to hurt. Mm-hmm. And a voice sort of popped into my head, and I started saying, like, I can see everyone else sitting properly, but I can't. I need to go to the back of the wall. I need to sit against the wall. I need to sit against the wall. This is not easy for me. This is not easy for me. Like, this is, like, it's easier for them. It's easy for them. Can't, like, and all of these things started popping in my head, and then I slowed down and calmed my breath, and all of a sudden this voice came in that was just like, whoever said that this was supposed to be easy? And the moment I heard that, I went, oh, I'm actually struggling here. I'm not struggling with back pain. Mm-hmm. I'm struggling with discomfort.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that allowed, like, I think that was like one pathway for me to start realizing, oh, I need to train my discomfort, because I'm quite used to, whenever I don't have an out in that way, I find one. And I think that sounds beautiful for the silent retreat to be that. Would you say that's who should come to you to do a silent retreat, is somebody who feels the call? Would you have anything else to add to that?
Yes, I think the notion of calling is an important one. I think we all feel that calling in a different way. But the calling is always about a homecoming. So it's about coming back home, coming back to ourselves. So that's actually the paradox of this journey, which now another poet, this time the English poet, T.S. Eliot, sums up by saying, maybe we've come to the end of our time, and that would be a good place to bring this up. He says that at the end of all your searching, I'm not exactly sure if I'm paraphrasing and quoting him, but the gist of it is at the end of all our searching, we will come back to the place where we started from, and we will discover that place as if it were for the first time. I think that's a beautiful way of putting that side by side with the poem I read. I mentioned about how Basho, every day is a journey and the journey is home. Eliot renders it in this way, that at the end, we come back to where we started. So the journey does not take you to a place that's fundamentally different from where you are. You're not going to become someone who's fundamentally different from who you really are, but it allows you to have a fresh, renewed sense of rediscovering that which you have always been. So That's, I think, is very important. And in that sense, it's a homecoming. It's coming back to yourself.
Thanks so much for coming on today.
My pleasure, Alessandro.
That's the episode. That's all I got for you today. I just want you to remember you're not alone in this. Make sure you subscribe to stay connected, of course, and comment your win, because every time a man sees other men winning, they don't feel alone anymore, and I love that. Tools are in the show notes, starting with the Better Husband in 2-minute emails. Let's build this together. I'll see you next week.